Good evening. Welcome to this evening's regular council meeting for Monday, March the 17th, 2014. I'm Acting Mayor Ted Schaefer, and with me tonight is Councillor Jack Arnold, Councillor Rosemary Wallace, Councillor Gail Martin, Councillor Terry James, Councillor Dave Hall, and the staff. We have our Assistant Director of Corporate Services, Graham Flack, Carolyn Machado, our Manager of Legislative Services, Francis Chung, our CAO, Gerald Minchuk, our Director of Development Services and Economic Development, and Rory Thompson, our Fire Chief. I would now need someone to make a motion to move the agenda. Councillor James, Councillor Martin. Questions, amendments? All those in favor? It's unanimous. The minutes of the last meeting of March the 3rd, I need a motion to adopt them. Councillor Hall, Councillor Martin. Questions? All those in favor? It's unanimous. This evening we have a couple of delegations, and we have Cheryl Gregson from the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC, and yeah, have a seat.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much for the time to present to you this evening. I'm going to give you a very high-level overview of a new piece of public policy which is being presented by the Coalition of Childcare Advocates and the Early Childhood Educators of British Columbia. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm a former Vancouver School Board trustee, and I have the privilege of traveling around the province and speaking to different councils, school districts, community organizations about this, what we call the solution to the current childcare crisis in BC. In front of you, you should have one of these green booklets with the more detail of the plan inside, as well as on the top a list of our current supporters. And you'll notice there 27 different local governments, school districts around the province, and hundreds of community organizations representing 1.6 million British Columbians now. So I'll move through this quite quickly, but happy to take questions if there's time afterwards. Just also for you to know, the chairperson of the coalition is in the audience. She lives a couple of blocks from here in Langley, and also the president of ECEBC. So this plan is a response to two conflicting realities that we have in British Columbia. We have more and more now a focus and an understanding of the importance of early learning for young children. We have full school day kindergarten now for our 5-year-olds, and in every community we have Strong Start programs, about 400 of them around the province, which are drop-in programs for parents and their young children. We have early learning programs happening through the Ministry of Education and delivered by boards of education. At the same time, we have every kindergarten teacher in the province who early in the kindergarten year measures children on 5 developmental domains, and that is mapped across the province. And it's not looking at individual children, but at population scores on developmental vulnerability. And I just had a quick look at Langley as a whole, knowing the difference between Langley City and Langley Township. But the provincial average, for you to know, of vulnerability is actually increasing. It's 32.5% around the province of 5-year-olds who show up for kindergarten not ready to be as successful as they could be in their school experience. And you can see that Aldergrove has a very worrying trend, even higher than the provincial average. At the same time we have that focus on the importance of early learning from kindergarten up, we have an ongoing childcare crisis in this community and in literally every community, big and small, across BC. High fees for parents that now top $1,000 a month, in some places getting close to $2,000 a month per child. We have low wages for early childhood educators, mostly women in the sector, not enough quality spaces, and that's licensed family childcare and licensed group childcare, and more of an emphasis on big box commercial chains, which international experience shows us is not the solution to the childcare crisis. We also know that no one municipality, however hard they try, will solve the childcare crisis for their residents. It needs provincial leadership. And so we have this BC plan to cap parent fees at a maximum of $10 a day, $7 a day for part-time, and no user fee for families who are low income under $40,000 a year, improving the wages and the education of early childhood educators, including all children whose parents want and need them to have access to early childhood education, meeting demonstrated community need, and our plan is consistent with one of the early learning frameworks, so the BC Ministry of Education Early Learning Framework, and there are Aboriginal frameworks as well in the province. The highlights, and again, this is such a high-level snapshot, but you've got more detail for bedtime reading in your green booklet. So we're suggesting a new piece of legislation in Victoria, an Early Care and Learning Act, not just a downward extension of the existing School Act, a new home for childcare out of the Ministry for Children and Family Development and into the Ministry of Education. And that actually is a national and international trend now. So an expanded role for boards of education, and I think trustees on boards recognize that what happens to children before their 5th birthday matters on how successful they are in kindergarten. Building from existing spaces, so developing more spaces in buildings like this even. Enhancing kindergarten and grade 1 by having early childhood educators working with teachers as colleagues in those classrooms, and the plan has been endorsed by the BCTF. Strengthening family and school-age childcare to make sure those options are relevant for families, and an investment in the workforce. Here's a snapshot of the countries and provinces and territories that have already made the move of childcare into a Ministry of Education. Finland being the most recent a couple of weeks ago, and we've got now First Nations in BC who are delivering childcare in a seamless continuum through a Department of Education and their First Nations. The folks at UBC very kindly have looked at what the impact of our plan would be on the BC economy, looking at international and national examples of affordable, accessible childcare, more women able to enter and re-enter the workforce when they have young children, government then collecting more revenue from income taxes and spending in local economies, early childhood educators better paid, business saving money, which is why the Surrey Board of Trade, Chambers of Commerce, and Van City Credit Union are all endorsing the plan because they know that it's good for business to have reliable employees who come back from mat leave, and families, of course, saving money that they can then spend in their local economies. Quebec has a childcare system. It's a leader in BC. Whatever other issues Quebec might have, their childcare system is a plus for the residents there. Their plan after 12 years actually is paying for itself, and that's the economists who demonstrate that, not just the childcare advocates like me. So more women able to work, pumping more money into their GDP in Quebec. So interestingly, the Business Council of BC President and CEO, Greg D'Avignon, said recently that increasing support for early childhood education is vital to our success. And the TD Bank senior economist, Craig Alexander, has gone on record many times as talking about the value of investing in the early years, both short-term and long-term. So what does implementation, how does it look like? How do we start to move forward to implement a plan to move us away from the crisis we're in now to where we need to be in this province 5, 10, and 20 years down the line? So suggesting that childcare move to the Ministry of Education, a relatively low-cost, no-cost move for the provincial government. That new legislation I spoke about, working with First Nations because they need to have the power and resources to govern their own early care and learning. Reducing parent fees to $10 a day, and that is being costed out at $88 million to start. Planning with a stable budget and planning with communities for expanding spaces. Noteworthy supporters of this plan, taken from the list that's in your packages, regional and municipal governments, and my colleagues and I have recently been up to Williams Lake and Salmon Arm, so this really is a BC plan, not just a Metro Vancouver plan. We have academics and ECD experts endorsing the plan. The Fort Langley Childcare Society has endorsed the plan, the Langley Teachers Association, so we've got support from this community as well. 19 school districts to date and growing, the Credit Union, Board of Trade I mentioned, and literally thousands of parents and grandparents have signed our online petition. This is the kind of support that is being, resolution being passed by municipal councils. Really just says that the plan has the potential to make a real difference for BC's children, families and communities, and urging politicians to commit to the vision and work to begin its implementation. And again, you can see from that list there's a lot of supporters across the province. So that's about as fast as I can present this information, just to give you a taste of what it entails, what it's about, where it comes from, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Questions from Council? Councillor Hall?
All right, it's interesting that you're advocating an expansion of the role of education, both their mandate and their funding, when the education system already is underfunded. So where would you see this extra money coming from? And then I have a second question about the private sector. But where would this money come from within that general provincial budget that already underfunds what exists within the education system?
So several answers, pieces of answers to that question. So right now the province spends about $296 million a year on childcare within the MCFD ministry. We're suggesting that that move, the entirety move over to the Ministry of Education as a starting place. And to be quite frank with you, childcare has been housed in many, many ministries since I've been involved in the early 80s and has not thrived in any ministry. Perhaps the only one we haven't been in is highways. Perhaps we would have done better there. But we think that at least moving to the Ministry of Education that has a mandate of lifelong learning, which it does, it's already in the School Act, has a focus on universal access, has a focus on being available to all children no matter how wealthy their parents are or what part of the province they live in. That at least is a better start than where childcare sits now in a basically child protection ministry. So that's the answer of why we think that's a better place to be. We certainly don't see childcare competing with the K-12 system, but being an asset to the K-12 system. And as to where the money comes from, well, there are always choices that the provincial government makes. There is a role for the federal government to make, and we expand on that idea in the document you'll see. We talk about extending parental leave to 18 months. The provincial government is committing $146 million next year to a new tax credit for families. There's some suggestion that if there's new money on the table, then perhaps starting with improving childcare would be a better place to start. There's also new money on the table for an early years strategy, which is really more bureaucracy, and we're suggesting that perhaps actually lowering parent fees would be a better place to start. So new money is on the table in the childcare world, but there certainly needs to be an expansion of funding, and we're working with other organizations now to look at some specific recommendations to government on revenue streams.
Thank you. Now, the private sector. So you suggest that the Business Council of BC is on, and these other advocates suggest that there's a boost to the economy with this kind of a program. So why is the corporate sector not contributing, once again, monetarily to this? Why not a form of a pension or at least a subsidy initiated by the private corporation? If they see the long-term economic benefit of this, why are they not partnering? Why is the obligation simply on the public sector?
So childcare has existed in the marketplace since basically the 80s, when childcare really took off. And the marketplace has not served childcare well. Fees have just been getting higher year over year. Mostly women who work in the sector still have poverty wages that are below a living wage, and we have not met the number of quality spaces that are needed to meet demand. So childcare in the marketplace is a bit of a failure. It's like other public services that we think need to be high quality and are in the public domain. So our emergency services, 911, we expect to be in the public domain. Our K-12 system, we have a strong commitment to that. Our healthcare system in this country, and we see childcare as another invaluable public service. And perhaps the important way that the corporate world can be a good citizen and support childcare is through a progressive tax system and by paying appropriate taxes. I will just add that in your package you'll see some of our fact sheets that support the plan. The most recent one that was written and produced is fact sheet number 5, which is why childcare is good for BC business, and we actually spoke with the Surrey Board of Trade to answer some of the questions business has about why this is a good investment. So that might be a helpful read as well.
Last one. Thank you for your comments to this point. All right, so I'm going along with you here, but now there's a problem here. You're suggesting reduction of the fee, but an increase to the wage. So this is perhaps people's most valuable asset. But if we devalue, or the perception is a devaluation of that asset by lowering the cost to individuals for a daily plan, $10 a day. How does one reconcile the idea that the workers or the service level providers should be respected and compensated in a better way? We're moving in two different directions here, and we have to try to find some kind of reconciliation of it.
Thank you. Good question. So when we think about our elementary schools and the kind of investment we make in quality education, what we want to be quality education for young children, we value our teachers enough that we pay them a decent wage, a living wage, perhaps underfunded still, but certainly more than the $12 or $14 an hour that an early childhood educator makes. So yes, absolutely, we need to invest more in the workforce. We don't expect somebody going to grade 2 to pay $1,200 a month to access public education, and yet we still value that education. So I don't think that lowering the fees makes childcare any less valuable. And in fact, I would argue that we're already devaluing children by allowing the vast majority of children of working parents to be in unregulated, unsafe, potentially illegal care in this province, and in fact across most of the country. When you think about the few spaces we have that are licensed for children, particularly under the age of 3, most children are in unregulated care where they can't tell their parents what kind of day they had or how many children were in a basement or in a converted garage. And those are the kinds of situations we hear the tragic results from. And children arriving at kindergarten not ready to be successful because they haven't had access to quality in the young years. So there's lots we can do to increase the value we put on the care that we offer to young children and the early childhood educator who is well trained and well compensated.
All right, so you're advocating more regulation, but in this move to the education away from the Ministry of Children and Families, that sort of imperils that. So what, in step with this recommendation, is to be done about the regulation of this to improve the standards that are out there?
Well, we actually have in BC fairly good regulations now, licensing regulations. The worrying part is that those regulations are up for review, and there's some worry that they're going to be weakened, allowing caregivers to perhaps take more children and reduce the quality of care that they're offered. So it isn't a problem that we need to increase regulation. We need to have more spaces that are quality and regulated and licensed so that more children have access to them, rather than parents having no choice because they can't afford the $1,200 in a regulated space, having to choose the $900 unregulated care. That's the problem.
Thank you very much. We just received this little brochure from you this evening. I'll be reading this with some interest on capping the fees at $10 a day, and with no annual cost to individuals or families of an income of less than $40,000, and then to still have wage levels of $25 an hour plus 20% benefits, and including those with extra support needs, children with extra support needs. So I'm going to have to try and wrap my head around this information that you've just given me here. So
I think what we're doing here is making the same kind of push that people made decades ago for young children to be in primary school, that there was a need to make it available and accessible to all families who wanted to make it, and cost shouldn't be a barrier.
Okay. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your time.
And our next delegation is Dr. Victoria Lee from the Fraser Health Authority. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the privilege of speaking with you this evening. I'd like to speak to you today about My Health, My Community survey. I believe Councillor Wallace and Mayor Schaefer and Director Kim Hilton, who's not here, unfortunately had a lot of opportunities to hear about the survey, so it might be a bit repetitive for you, but we thought that the opportunity to learn about the survey would be informative for the whole group. So My Health, My Community survey basically looks at what actually makes our Canadians, residents and citizens healthy or unhealthy. And from our perspective, there are a lot of areas that contribute to health, including early childhood development, as mentioned in the earlier presentation. But as you will note from this graphic, health care actually only contributes to about 25% of health, and the rest actually comes from broader areas of environment, of daily social economics, as well as cultural life. And what we're trying to do is, because health surveys that are currently routinely carried out, those are through community health surveys nationally, they're currently carried out at a very high level. So for example, for Langley, there's information available for City of Langley and Township of Langley that's amalgamated together with other municipalities that's considered in Fraser South, such as Surrey, White Rock, etc. At that level, we get information about physical activity of, for example, residents and citizens in this area. We see this as not appropriate level of information, and to be able to do planning as well as evaluation of our services. And that's not only for health services or healthcare services, but I think also information that's quite helpful for municipal planning and evaluation as well. So we have partnered with Vancouver Coastal and University of British Columbia to carry out a survey that's very comprehensive, with the goal of reaching out to community level of survey. So our target is to get to the municipal level, and if we can get more data, to get to neighborhood level of information. We have been able to successfully pilot this at Vancouver Coastal with Richmond and North Shore, and the municipalities that were involved have found the information from the surveys to be really, really helpful in not just understanding their municipality better, but understanding the links between various planning purposes as well as health information. So progress to date in Langley, if we're looking at health surveys, for example, the community survey, we currently have the data that we're looking to get 2% of the sample, which is actually a much larger sample than the national survey. That actually equates to 406 people that we want to get the survey completed from the city. It might sound like a lot, but if we're looking around the room, even if we say have 10 people from individuals in this room go out and get surveys completed, we would be looking at 80% of the target. And as you imagine, if we're getting 2% versus the 4% target would then be 812 people. If we get to the 4% target, that means that we can get even more granular data for the City of Langley that will be valuable for us. And the reason that we need this is because not only is the health survey carried out at sporadic time intervals and not at the granular level that we need, but also because the long-form census has been abolished and we no longer actually have access to that data either. So we really need you and your support to champion for better information, better data, and better services for our community. We would like your support and championship and leadership to spread the word within the municipality with your friends and family. And one of the things that we've found it to be really be helpful is to have the municipal leadership in this area to really support it in communication channels that are available, as well as public places like parks and recs, for example. We do have surveyors that are going to be available for those that are not able to complete the survey that's online. So we have paper versions available, as well as for harder to reach populations, we have surveyors that are able to go and carry out the surveys. So we've actually had some initial conversations to look at opportunities to explore the survey and promotion of the survey, and thanks to the leadership from the mayor, we've been able to collaborate to include this information for the upcoming tax notices. We would like to publish the article on My Health, My Community and City Express newsletter. I believe the survey will be available for intranet website, for city website as well, and then displays hopefully in community centers, libraries, city hall and service centers, as well as articles regularly in local media has really helped. In some of the communities where we're seeing higher numbers, there's been lots of buzz at the community, at the local community level, with leaders around this table talk about what's around, why the survey is important. So that would be wonderful to see. Some of the other strategies that's been helpful is to have fire and police departments complete survey and help to do that within their workplace and also with their colleagues and families. There's other opportunities, of course, with social media and school districts that we have also partnered with, and then internal promotions that's been also quite helpful. So those are some of the ideas, and there's lots of information actually available about the survey and a great little video, but I've been informed to keep it very short so that we can have more time allotted to discussion and questions. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Doctor. Questions? Councillor James?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, and I'm actually familiar with this survey and have taken it myself. My question is, one of the questions that I've been asked is, how do you assure confidentiality? Because some of the questions are extremely, like if you're going to be honest about it, some of them could be pretty impactful. So.
Yes, so that's a question that's, I think, very important to clarify. So there's two servers actually we have for the surveys. The survey itself is anonymous, but then for the purpose of drawing prizes as incentives, we're gathering information about your contact information. So it's important to be clear that the contact information actually is very separate from the actual content of the survey, which is completely anonymous and held at two different servers.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hall?
People are inundated with surveys. And if I'm going to help promote this and whatnot, I got to have an idea of what the heck you're going to use the information for. Mm-hmm. So we have the, what is it, the McCreary study that does school students and whatnot, and you get this information year after year after year, but no one ever comes back to tell you what's been done with the information, what programs are available. So you're going to come back later and tell us what you've done with this data and what specific programs are being offered to this community?
And I think we can work together on something more collaborative too, because what we found in Richmond and North Shore is that we don't necessarily know what we're going to find from the survey. But what we do find is there's been lots of really interesting information. For example, Richmond found that there was linkages between having that sense of belonging to the community, as well as smoking rates, for example, or the linkages between where the walking trails are located versus participation in community activities. And in North Shore, there was quite a bit of information that was found on access to early childhood development or childcare services that was very important for the community. So what we would like to do is to be able to reach that 2% minimum, to be able to get that valuable and rich data that's reflective of our community, so then we can come back to you and present that information so that you can look at, well, where is it actually informative for us in at the community level. And from health services perspective, from public health, we can also look at that and say, well, do we need to utilize our services and locate our services? So I think we would like to use the survey and results from the survey so that it's bi-directional and being able to share that information.
Supplementary? So what joint committees will this come back to? So there's a mayor's committee on public health that's associated with Fraser Health, and I would imagine there's something through us. What's the committee that Councillor Wallace sits? Healthier Community. So there's two committees that this might go to, and we might receive something back from them. Are there other joint committees that operate? I just want something to be accomplished once there's the collection of this stuff.
Yeah, and we feel the same way. I mean, from our perspective, we're not interested in just gathering data for data. We always talk about data for action, not just data for information. So I agree in terms of sharing this information, the most appropriate place would be the Healthier Community Partnerships table, and then we can talk about other channels for us to present that data, and I'm happy to come back to this table if that's appropriate, and others as well.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to mention that it's going to be very helpful for the people or the organizations that sit on the Healthier Community Partnerships, because there's a lot of social services represented on that committee. So I just see that as being beneficial. So I don't know if you can even name a few of the people that are on that committee, the organizations. I think that would be helpful in showing how that survey would, help.
Sure. So that Healthier Community Partnership table is made up with leadership from the township as well as the city and organizations that serve in both of those areas. So we have non-governmental organizations such as Stepping Stone that's represented there. We also have Board of Commerce. So we have industry, corporate, and we have private partners that are represented. We also have school district leadership that's represented at the table. We have Fraser Health, of course, and we have Seniors Task Force, for example, that's there with representation from NGOs as well as internal city and township leaders. So we have Kim Hilton that's there from the city, of course, and we also have at the table MCFD that's represented. So it's a very much, I think, something that the city and township should both be very proud of, and being able to establish a multi-sectoral table that can work on upstream health promotion and disease prevention. As I mentioned in the first slide that I shared, because health is much more than health care, we do require that multi-sectoral approach to health to be able to be really successful in ensuring the health of the community that we are living in. So,
Further questions?
I would really love to see at least 10 people from individuals at this table reach out and have the survey completed, because if that actually happens, we'll see up to 80%. If those 10 people reach out to more, then we'll have our 100% in no time. And I really like to see, as the medical health officer for Langley, to see that we don't just settle at the 2% level, but 4%, and as much as possible to get that granular community neighborhood level data. So thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, and I know you're quite passionate about this, and to come and you're the medical officer for the Langley area, putting so much time and effort into it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Next item is the Mayor's Report. The next regular council meeting is April the 7th, 2014. We have another regular council meeting on April the 14th, 2014. And now under Metro Vancouver, Councillor Martin, do you have anything to report?
No, the board in brief is attached. If there's any questions, I'll see what I can do to answer them. Thank you.
Councillor Hall?
The board in brief had a mention of the waste-to-energy facility and a suggested requirement of 370,000 tons per year is projected. So some of the criticism out there has been that perhaps Metro wouldn't be able to have that much garbage if they're effective enough in terms of recycling and other waste reduction. So I guess the question is, what guarantees are there that garbage won't ultimately have to be imported into the Metro region to feed this waste energy facility that's being built at a capacity of 370,000?
So you said, what was that again, Councillor Hall, about?
Okay, so the plan by Metro
Is for
is to build a facility,
Yeah,
that will gobble up 370,000 tons.
right.
Okay, the criticism out there and the question, and I can't get a real handle on how much 370,000 is, but the criticism has been that if you have a 75% conversion rate from where we are right now to recycle and redistribute a lot of the stuff that's currently going into the garbage stream, there might not be enough to fully feed that 370,000, and the economics of building a facility that large are that if you don't have that, then you're going to have to import it from somewhere else, from the valley or from upcountry or wherever. So I'm throwing out 75% conversion rate, and I'm just throwing out the idea that critics of this are suggesting that, well, no, maybe we should back off and build a smaller one to start with, and as we see the realities of diversion, perhaps we go with another second small one or something. So what's the Metro argument that 370,000 tons is the preferred?
Well, the 370,000 tons could be for one, or it could be for three, depending on what the procurement comes up with. I mean, it's a process that basically, we don't really know a lot of information because we don't want to be swayed one way or the other. And as far as the size goes, I mean, they're not building for today. They're building for hopefully 20 or 30 years down the road. So even if the garbage and the recycling, and hopefully the recycling, will go up to 75, 80%, with the population growth, we're still going to be receiving garbage. I mean, unfortunately, we're always going to have garbage. So, I think they're looking for the future, but it is kind of unclear with this 370,000 tons. It looks like it could be one great big waste-to-energy facility when, in fact, it could be two, it could be three smaller ones.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Councillor Martin. Library happenings, Councillor James.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. There is a whole lot of stuff going on in the library, so I'm going to try and streamline this a little tiny bit. So this is what's happening in our library between tomorrow, March 18th and April 6th, starting with Tuesday, March the 18th from 6:30 to 8:30. And there's a Imperial Hobbyists in Richmond are bringing their popular and crazy cool games to our library. So teens between the age of 12 to 18 are invited to come out, and there'll be free pizza and refreshments, and they're invited to try all these cool games. The library does ask that you register in advance, and I'll provide that information at the end. Wednesday, March the 19th from 1 to 2, there's a presentation from the Owl Society to learn about birds and their prey, and live birds will be on display, and that's drop-in. Top 10 scams to avoid on Saturday, March 22nd from 2 to 3. The Better Business Bureau is sending their vice president to make a presentation on the top scams in BC to help people learn tips and tools to protect yourself. The library asks that you call or visit just to let them know if you're coming. Xbox games in the library on Wednesday, March 26th from 1 to 3. Kids 7 to 12 are invited to come play their favorite games, and they've got some brand new stuff for you to try. They'd like to know if you'd like to come to that as well. And then 2 seminars pertaining to seniors. Saturday, March the 29th is the first one from 2 to 3. And this is a home care manager from Senior Link is going to discuss a list of challenges and benefits for seniors when faced with making the decision to move to an extended care facility. And the second is Parenting Your Parent, Saturday, April 5th from 2 to 3. And again, the same lady is going to provide a different perspective when speaking to people who may be looking at putting their parents in a seniors facility. So the library would like to know if you're coming to that as well. So for more information, please feel free to call them at 604-514-2850. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any questions? Seeing none, our next one is bylaws. It's Bylaw 2932, final reading of a bylaw to amend the fees and charges bylaw number 2837, amendment number 14, bylaw 2932. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Martin, Councillor Arnold. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Next one is bylaw 2933, first and second reading of a bylaw cited as the City of Langley Business License and Regulation Amendment number 1 bylaw 2933 to prohibit the sale of aquatic turtles and turtle eggs. And I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Hall, Councillor Martin. There will be a committee of the whole meeting here April the 7th for public to provide input on this amendment. So, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Committee reports from the Parks and Environment Advisory Committee. This is the naming of the trails. And I'd like now to ask Councillor Hall to speak on this report.
Really, as part of the wayfinding strategy for the city, the Peak Committee has worked for a number of years, actually, on trying to get a handle on trail names so that a reasonable map could be created and distributed so people using the trails in the city could find their way from one place to another, and it helps to have a name and some signage. So a few months ago, a number of trail names were approved that left some remaining. The main trail has an existing name, and I'll talk to that in a bit. But the recommendation of the Peak Committee was to name trails 2, 5, 8, and 9. And what I would suggest is we move each one of those independently. There is included in the report alternate names that were considered. And if we could march our way through those, and then I'll put forward another proposal for the renaming to some extent of the main trail.
Okay.
As recommended by the committee.
So if you'd like to start off with the first recommendation, that's Trail 2.
Recommended that trail number, do we have a map? Actually, do we have a map to project? It certainly would have been better for the public's benefit. I mean, we have it in our package, but anyway. Recommended that trail number 2 be named the Langley Creek Trail.
Yes, seconder. Councillor Martin, discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Second, recommended that trail number 5 be named Power Line Trail East.
Need a seconder? Seconder for this one? Councillor Arnold, discussion? All those in favor? Against? Against?
Yeah,
Councillor Wallace is against?
I just don't like that.
Next,
trail number 8.
Next recommendation, trail number 8, it's recommended the name be Power Line Trail West.
Seconder? Need a seconder? Councillor Arnold?
I'll speak to this because, all right. This is the hydro cut, okay? But what the committee thought was that, well, everybody, there's an advantage in a geographical name rather than something creative, right? It could have been Birdsong Trail or something like that. But people identify this with the hydro lines. The committee felt that naming it after a corporation is fraught with peril, in that hydro could go like BC Gas or whatever, that's all of a sudden terracing, that's whatever. So rather than naming it the Hydro Trail, they decided that they would call it the Power Line Trail. So that was the rationale behind it.
Councillor James?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the explanation, Councillor Hull, because I have to say that I think that this committee has done an exceptional job coming up with some identifying but creative names for the trails. These were the only two that I wasn't enamored with, for obvious reasons. But the more I think about it, I have to agree that to the long term, I think people do identify different components of our trail system with their geographical location, and I quite frankly couldn't think of anything more creative. So thank you.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Against? Councillor Wallace is against. Trail number 9.
And the last one, trail number 9, be named Baldy Creek Trail, and I'll speak to this too.
Need a seconder? Councillor Wallace?
This one, the other alternative was interurban, which, if you know the trail, it goes from Michaud Crescent down to Bryden, and there was some debate amongst the committee as to which would be more appropriate. But in that the others have identified the important creeks, and this runs alongside Baldy Creek, the sentiment was to retain the idea that the geographical setting, the naming after creeks for particular trail. So that's why this one was favored and put forward.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Against? It's unanimous. Councillor Hall?
Now, the last one, just in terms of history, a long way back, the main trail was actually named by a previous council, and the name was adopted, and it was the Rotary Walkway. And it was the feeling of the committee that certainly Rotary that component should be retained because of the significant contribution that the Rotary made to the original trail system. But in keeping with the idea that this is along important waterways, the thinking was to expand that to rather than Rotary Walkway to rather Rotary Nicamickle Trail. So you do more than just walking on that stretch, and certainly the inclusion of Nicamickle in there is very important as it follows the plain and the waterway. So that's what I would put forward as a recommendation, that council now adopt the new name for the main trail as Rotary Nicamickle Trail.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor James? Discussion further? Seeing none? All those in favor? Against? It's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Hall. The next item we have is under administrative reports, and this is the proposed new school site acquisition charges for school district number 35. And there's
Mr. Mayor, could I make a suggestion?
Councillor Hall?
What we have before us is both a report and a staff recommendation. And what I would suggest that we do is we split that into two motions. The first being receipt of the report, allowing comment on the report itself, and then to deal with the recommendation after that. I certainly have an alternative amendment or change to that second part. But if we deal with both muddled together, receipt of the report might be rejected on the basis of the recommendation. So I'd like to split it into two parts, please.
Okay, do you have a like to make a motion then to split it then?
Yes, I move to split the current motion into two parts, leaving off after the comma.
For information.
Yeah.
And is there a seconder on this? Councillor Martin? Discussion on this at all? Councillor Martin? Oh. Oh, Councillor Hall on the split? Okay. Any discussion on that? On this amendment? All those in favor?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Councillor Martin?
I have questions of the report,
Yes.
so I can ask them now. Thank you. Correct?
Well, no, we have a split on the table.
Well, we've got
Okay.
a split
Yeah, but we're voting on,
to split it, and then we'll have a discussion
okay,
on the
then
motion.
we're going to move to receive it for information, correct? All
That's right.
Fine, all right.
So a move on the split. All those in favor? Against? It's unanimous. Now we have a discussion on this, so we'll have a motion to receive this. Just need a mover and a seconder. So Councillor Martin, Councillor Hall, discussion now on Councillor Martin.
Okay, having read through this actually a couple of times now, I'm a little confused. First of all, I'd want to clarify, in the letter that we received from the school board chair, her letter to the Minister of Education, she's talking about the ESSP, which is the Eligible School Site Proposal. And the letter that was received from the minister to the school board, they're talking about the SSAC, which is a school site acquisition charge. Are those one and the same?
To staff.
Your worship, to Councillor Martin, the school site acquisition charges are the charges that have been calculated by the school district as a funding requirement to build the school in the school district. The ESSP is eligible school site proposal report that was developed by the school board to outline which new schools that are eligible for the school site acquisition charges to be calculated on the fees. So in a way, they're related in terms of how they calculate the school site acquisition charges, are based on the ESSP.
Each individual school.
Correct.
I mean, we opposed the SSAC, school site acquisition charge. We opposed that and we wrote a letter to the minister with our opposition, right?
That's correct. We wrote it to the school district, actually.
Okay. And then the school district wrote the Minister of Education in November, talking about the ESSP. So,
no, I think the school board.
well, that's what it says right here in her letter.
We oppose the school site acquisition charges
Right.
that are being imposed or proposed by the school district onto the city. And in the letter from the school district to the minister, I believe it outlines that the Langley City objects to the fees being imposed to the city of Langley.
I'm trying to, what the school board chair says to the minister in her last paragraph is, I also understand that in the case of a rejection of the ESSP, eligible school site proposal, by a municipal council, the ministry would appoint a facilitator to resolve the dispute between the parties. Please consider this letter our request to appoint a facilitator to work with the city and ourselves. So that, but it's the SSAC that,
I think, Councillor Martin, through the chair, I think I understand what you're asking. The ESSP in the letter is for individual school, whereas the school site acquisition charges are imposed district, or it's one fees imposed to the city for different type of usage of the development. So that's the difference between
Okay.
school site acquisition charges and the ESSP.
It's clear as mud, thanks. Anyway, so the Minister of Education has rejected our objection, saying that they can go ahead with the school site acquisition fee, because we did not meet the criteria specified under 937.4 of the Local Government Act, and that we did not indicate a proposed eligible school site requirement, which is the other one that we were talking about, right?
That's correct. So
But-
what they're objecting was that we did not make a case to individually for each school why we oppose the fees. Whereas
For an individual site.
That's correct.
But see, this is where, to me, it's all going haywire, because what we were opposing was the actual school site acquisition charge and our development fees doubling in price. That's what we were
That's
opposing. It seems to me, by this letter received from the Minister of Education, that he's talking about individual sites. So to me, it's two different things.
That's correct.
So what is he, and of course, we didn't specify the ESSP, because we don't know yet where all these sites are going to be, correct? I mean, we have an idea.
We have an idea, but
They're not specific of where these school sites are going to be. So to me, it's two different things, I believe. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but that's the way I feel. Furthermore, in the attachment sent from the Minister of Education to, I think it was to the school board, they lay out the consultation process and the exceptions and so on. Now, it says that the development of an SSAC, so now we're back to SSACs, not the ESSPs, should provide adequate opportunity for meaningful and informed input from the stakeholders, which we are a stakeholder, certainly. And the legislation provides collaboration between school districts and local governments in the determination of the charge. The focal point is the requirement for consideration of the proposal by the school board at an open public meeting. Now, I understand they had an open public meeting, and I understand you and Mayor Schaefer went. But prior to the public meeting, it says, the school district should structure a consultation process that allows stakeholders to express their ideas and concerns. And if my memory serves me correct, David Green, the Secretary-Treasurer, came to one of our meetings and said, we're proposing new SSACs. This is what it is, sort of like it or lump it kind of thing. There was no consultation. There was no discussion with council, and we understand why they want to do this. But at the same time, we also found that in the next 20 or 30 years, we're having very, very few students going to the schools. Very small amount in comparison to the township of Langley. So on that, you know, given that it's laid out in the minister's letter, I don't think that we had proper consultation from the school board. It also said stakeholders should be identified before a public participation strategy is developed. That was never done by the school board. I mean, they may have had their little strategy, but they didn't consult with us and tell us that this was coming. And again, if I recall correctly, it was a big surprise to all of us sitting around this table that our fees were going to double in price. It also says a range of public participation activities should be considered, including opportunities for comment, public meetings, and advisory committees. Again, in my estimation, that was not done. But having said all that, in regards to the school site acquisition fees, there is exceptions. And this is the one that we were going on, and that's the multi-jurisdictional school districts. And it says, in general, calculation of the SSAC should be kept simple and apply uniformly across the school district, even where there are more than one municipality in the school district. Such an approach is most appropriate in urban school districts that are quite compact, part of one essentially continuous urban region, have secondary school catchment areas that cross local government boundaries. That's us and the Township of Langley. However, it may be appropriate to establish a different charge for each community within a geographical large school district, especially where one community is growing faster than the other. The Municipal Act provides for the creation of a regulation that would allow different charges for one or more local governments within a school district, and that's what we were requesting. But it further says, the factors that might be considered in enhancing a regulation enabling a school district to calculate different SSACs for one or more local governments within a school district could include the following. The communities have separate local governments, which is us. And again, that was totally ignored. So I know that there is going to be an amendment coming, and this report, the second motion, which has not been made or anything like that, but it's going to be to take no further action. But when the amendment comes forward, hopefully we will just discuss the amendment and what the ramifications are. So I will have more questions if that amendment is seconded. But I think I just don't go by what's in this report. To me, it's not only confusing, but it seems at times, and I know you explained how, that we're talking about two different things, and I'm not sure that everything was considered, especially in the Municipal Act where they state that it could certainly be done. And it's the consultation that we were never done by with the school board. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
All right, I just want to cut to the chase. So we had multiple meetings with the district through the Secretary-Treasurer. At any time, did they raise the prospect that we would have to address specific sites according to the ruling from the minister? So we lacked the information that was necessary. The Minister of Education, Peter Fassbender, has suggested that we have now run out of time to make such an appeal, and has actually said that there's no appeal process here. So we had a specific meeting with the Minister of Education in Victoria. In the course of that meeting were his conclusions about specific site reference and whatnot ever brought up?
Councilor, through the chair, we actually had the meeting at the UBCM with the minister in Vancouver, and the minister did not discuss about the ESSP prospect.
We've had multiple meetings with the school board. We delegated. We had a visitation from the Secretary-Treasurer, and repeatedly it was suggested that a facilitator or a mediator would be the result of us rejecting their assessed fees. That was a consistent line. So in terms of this report, could you interpret? The Minister of Education has suggested that there will be no facilitator or mediator. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, so I'm building the case a little bit here. So we lacked essential information from both the ministry and the school board. We were given information that our appeal would be heard and a mediator appointed, and we could go through that process. We're now told that we're too late. So when we look later at a proposed amendment to go to the ombudsman or ombudsperson. The rationale behind that is receiving information in a timely way, receiving accurate information, and being treated fairly by the parties. In this particular case, I would say both the school board and the ministry. So thank you to staff for their ongoing work on preparing the report and the large amount of information, because quite frankly, I believe that what has been added tonight in the terms of the depth of the report really enables us to go and file an appeal even though we're told that one is not available. Thank you.
Councillor Arnold?
Yeah, I thought we split these two together and we're supposed to be discussing whether we're receiving the letter from the Minister of Education at this point.
We are, and it's the
Because it sounds to me
information.
like we've gone on to the second half, so why did we bother splitting it in the first place?
We are discussing the information in the letter that's in here, under 1, 2, the 5th paragraph.
So what are we voting on? Are we voting on whether or not we are receiving the letter
Yes,
for information?
we will be voting on that. That'll be the next, if there's no other speakers.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor James?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask a question of staff just to help me with my mental filing cabinet here. So one of the closing comments in Minister Fassbender's letter was, now that this SSAC has been enforced upon us, their capital bylaw should reflect the details, including estimates of new development units, number of school-aged children expected to be generated, general location and value of new school sites required to accommodate those students. Have we ever received anything even remotely close to that, containing that detailed information?
Your Worship, to Councillor James, no, not that specific details.
So that, again, to me, just seems a little bit like the cart before the horse. Like, to me, this is the kind of information, and not even to this detail, but this is the kind of information I think should have been provided to us either through a facilitator or the board or school board themselves, not once they've imposed this on us, because this is the kind of information that we would have needed to have, and I'll say why. Because we have a high population of condos and the township has a high population of single-family dwellings, I understand completely that the township, to the long term, the people who reside there will contribute more in dollars and cents than the city will. But again, there's that conundrum of, you know, us not having sites to acquire for schools. So I think that the process wasn't as transparent as I would have liked it to have been. Thank you. And that's detailed in the report, which is why I'm speaking to it. Thank you.
Further discussion on this letter? Seeing none, all those in favor of receiving this for information? Against? Councillor Arnold. And the second item is now that I'm going to need a mover or a seconder, that no further action be taken on this matter. Is there a mover on this item? Mover? Nobody is moving anything here? Is there any amendments?
Well, at this point, it wouldn't be an amendment, it would be a new motion,
So would you...
because the other one has died, yes?
Yes, it has died.
All right, so I move that the Council of the City of Langley direct staff to pursue concerns and resolution of these concerns regarding school site acquisition fees through the Office of the Provincial Ombudsperson, to make it politically correct. It was ombudsman, but it's even hard to pronounce that way.
Seconder for this motion,
I'll second it for discussion.
Councillor Martin.
I'd like to speak to it.
Councillor Hall? Oh. Councillor, Mr. Chung?
No, I'd like to speak to it.
Is there clarification that you require on this, Mr. Chung?
Yeah, Your Worship, to council, while, obviously staff has no position on going with the ombudsperson, but as council is aware, we did receive some legal opinion about this matter. Obviously, I can't divulge the details of it because they're privileged information, but the recommendation that I can disclose to council, and council is aware, is that what we should do first, if we're going to dispute this, is to go through Section 284, the community charter, to dispute this decision by the minister. And if that fails, then we will in turn look at the ombudsperson process. So I just want to inform council of that point.
Thank you for the info. Councillor Hall?
Staff's position was to simply walk away. And I believe that we need to proceed on a course of calling into question how the provincial government has treated us. Now, the legal opinion that was supplied suggested a two-step process, but certainly that does not preclude us following that course, and this motion includes that course. So if someone would like to put forward an amendment to pursue the first course and follow it with this one, I have no problem with that. But that having been said, to simply walk away is not good enough. Now, at the bottom end of the report that we received, there was a suggestion that there would be significant cost and time to pursue something through the ombudsperson. And I'm afraid that I have to contradict that. The complaint process is through a form. It's 30-minute time limited, 3,000 words maximum, and could be done in a very short period of staff time, given that we already have this documented evidence here. It's a matter of transferring some from one document to another. The cost is free. And the whole intent of the ombudsperson is to allow citizens of the province to pursue complaints not at cost to themselves. This is a legitimate pursuit by citizens and organizations that is cost-free. So why would we not pursue this injustice? The role of the ombudsperson is to ensure that the government provides clear and accessible public information. We've already established that they didn't do that. They didn't provide us the information. Consistent standards of practice and timely and appropriate complaint resolution. We've been told that we have no opportunity for complaint or appeal. And I believe that that is wrong. The Minister of Education has told us, I believe in error, that there's an application of the regulations that has put us behind the 8 ball here, and we have to simply accept this. That's wrong. And we need to proceed and follow a course of action that pursues a resolution to this. So as I said, I have no problem with someone putting forward an amendment to do this in a two-step process as recommended as options by our legal counsel.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Well, I don't disagree with what Councillor Hall said. Could you tell us, Mr. Chung, what Section 284 says in the Community Charter?
Your Worship, Councillor Martin, I don't have that information in terms of what it says in Section 284. It's really as a dispute resolution process between the city and the provincial government, or any local government and the provincial governments, that lays out the dispute resolution process.
Okay. I'm looking at the ombudsperson form, and it seems rather simple for what we have just gone through. To me, and again, I understand what Councillor Hall said, it's for, the citizens of British Columbia to have a voice in regards to complaints against the government, and I understand that, but this seems really too simple. I don't know whether this would work. I would think, and I would agree with Councillor Hall, if we did this, it would take staff time to fill this out. I agree that we didn't have all the information, but maybe it would be better to go through the dispute resolution, although that would incur some legal fees. Do we have any idea how much?
Yeah, I just want to clarify a point that Councilor Hall made. Under the budget implication of the report, we didn't specify the cost for ombudsperson, recognizing that Councilor Hall is probably right, that there will be minimum cost with the ombudsperson process. Well, we did say that there will be significant costs if it involves the judiciary system or the legislative appeal process. The ombudsperson, as we understand it, will not change the decision made by the minister, so I think that needs to be clear.
Right.
So the only way, perhaps, to get some change in the decision is go through the dispute resolution process.
So if we could go through the dispute resolution process, I would really like to get an idea of what the legal costs are. I mean, it's the opinion, I believe, I don't know what I'm allowed to say here, but obviously you're not recommending we go any further because you don't think we could get any further. But at the same time, I don't believe, and I agree with what other comments have been said, we did not have all the information at the time, and either did the Minister of Education. So I really would like to get an idea of the legal costs. But if we go through that and lose, you said then we could go to the ombudsperson, and it's still going to remain the same because he isn't going to change the decision anyway, right?
That's our understanding based on the information that we have. I know the city faced the same prospect, I think 10, 12 years ago when they imposed the last school site acquisition charges. And the city at that time did object to it. And the same result happened. The minister at that time imposed the school site acquisition charges. And we had to just live with that fees to this point.
Well, I guess, and I mean, we did discuss this, and I don't know if it's part of the report or whatever. If anybody wants to call a point of order, they can. But, I mean, I think that, if we had had the consultation process that was suggested by the Minister of Education, we might have been able to come to some kind of an agreement where, all right, we understand you need money. We're willing to contribute to that, but not at the same cost as, say, the Township, when they're going to have many thousands more students going than us, and no schools set here, maybe put some kind of a smaller charge onto us. I think we would agree with that. But doubling our costs and having no new school sites is, I just don't think is right.
Your Worship, Ms. Machado has Section 284 of the
Okay.
committee charter, so you can read it out.
Thank you. Section 284 of the Charter is request for assistance in relation to intergovernmental dispute. If a dispute arises between a municipality and another local government or the provincial government or a provincial government corporation, and the parties cannot resolve the dispute, one or more of the parties may apply to a dispute resolution officer for help in resolving the dispute. If an application is made under this subsection, the dispute resolution officer must review the matter, may attempt to help the parties resolve the dispute by any process the officer considers appropriate, including by using or referring the matter to mediation or another non-binding resolution process, and may assist the parties in determining how costs of the process are to be apportioned.
Thank you, Ms. Machado, but I guess the bottom line is that if we go with this, you feel that we're going to need legal counsel for this, and how can we be assured that our side of the story gets on there?
Yeah, if council wish to proceed with those two processes, I would suggest that council allocate allowance of approximately $30,000 in legal fees for staff to pursue this?
Councillor Hall?
So we've now gone from 0 to 30,000, and I just question the answer that I've received, because years ago, when this idea was not pursued by the council of the day, perhaps that's what set us up for the present circumstance. So we have received legal advice already. And the suggestion is that we can either go through a process that would cost us 0. I reject the idea that this will accomplish nothing. If nothing else, we benefit not only our community, but other communities put in the same position, in that if the ombudsperson finds that the city has been wrong, they don't necessarily have to just order the minister to overturn this, and perhaps you're right, the minister wouldn't. But certainly that would raise the profile of the prospect that not only the regulations need to be changed, but more importantly, there needs to be a valid appeal process. Government should not be able to simply arbitrarily rule that you must accept this, even if it's unfair, even if it's uninformed. So if you do not wish to pursue the legal estimate of 30,000, certainly back to the motion, it's important that then we simply pursue the available low-cost option that raises the profile, raises the issue, and allows a prospect that we don't get nailed for this, because the school district waited 10 years before doing this again. And certainly some future council should be addressing this in the very near future and not waiting 10 years to get hammered again.
Further discussion on this motion? Okay, there's a motion on the table that the Council of the City of Langley direct staff to pursue concerns and resolution of these concerns regarding school site acquisition fees through the Office of the Provincial Ombudsperson. Councillor Martin?
I don't think this is going to get us very far, personally. However, I agree that it could possibly raise some eyebrows. And if, by chance, the ombudsperson did say you weren't treated fairly, would it then be an idea to go to their dispute resolution under Section 284 of the Community Charter? I'd hate to spend $30,000 on this, but I also don't think that we should roll over either, because it's going to really hurt the development community.
Councilor Martin, through the chair, based on the information advice that we received, the ombudsperson has no jurisdiction to overrule the minister or make a decision to the ministry to change the school site acquisition charge. Okay. What the ombudsperson may do is to maybe question the process itself. So that's the best avenue or best outcome going through the ombudsperson process. If the city is seeking to reverse the decision made by the minister, then the avenue is to go through the dispute resolution process.
I think, yeah, I agree with you. I guess the other thing that we should be mindful of is that is also mentioned in the minister's letter to the school board, is that this bylaw will come into effect 60 days from the time that they do final reading or first, second, I don't know. So that is when? Have they done that?
They have done that already,
now.
yes.
So we've got less than 60 days to get this thing going. And yeah, I just, you know, we're damned if we do and damned if we don't, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we're between a rock and a hard place here, because they've already passed the bylaw. They're going to start charging the charges, or we're going to have to start charging the charges within 60 days. And it's not likely that because the charges are already in effect, that the minister would change his mind anyway.
So is there,
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify some of the discussion, primarily emanating from Councillor Martin, the city based or framed its position regarding the proposed school site acquisition charge based upon a specific document, a copy of which is attached in your agenda package. It's called British Columbia Ministry of Education Implementation Guide, School Site Acquisition Charge Exceptions, Multi-Jurisdictional School District, copy attached. Specifically, it raises the point, it may be appropriate to establish a different charge for each community within a geographically large school district, especially where one community is growing faster than the other within the school district. So that's the scenario that we based and framed our position. Furthermore, in response to some of the discussion primarily relating to Councillor Martin, there was an extensive consultative process relating to this subject matter. The school district, with the assistance specifically of Urban Systems, developed a ESSP, Eligible School Site Proposal. It was a report presented back in May of last year, which projected different growth rates both within the city and the township, as you may recall. Based upon the different growth projections in the city and the township, a school site acquisition charge was calculated. The basis of which was that the city made reference to the fact that only 8.87%, pardon me, of the estimated eligible development units would be built within the city of Langley from the period of 2013 to 2023. From that position, the city received a supplementary piece of information from the school district urban systems consultants identifying another option, an option 3, which is in fact what we presented to the school board as an acceptable alternative option, recognizing that the growth within the city of Langley was modest enough to be accommodated within all of our existing elementary schools, and that we advocated that an alternative calculation would only relate to a school site acquisition charge or levy towards a new high school. So that's what that's what was presented to the school district, and the school district, as reported onto supplementary to the Minister of Education, fully expected a mediator be appointed. It was a surprise to the school district, in addition to staff, when the Ministry of Education responded in the matter, denying the opportunity for a mediation given the circumstances of this proposal. So I just wanted to sort of further elaborate to clarify that there was an extensive public consultation process, and that was the approach that we took towards this subject matter.
I guess one of the points, and thank you, Mr. Binchuk, for filling us in on that. One of the points about the specific school sites, I mean, that was saying that we did not sort of make a case on that. And that's what, going back to the very beginning when I started talking, we weren't talking about not agreeing with a specific site, we were talking about with the overall charge. So does that mean to say that when a specific site comes up that we can argue with it?
Well, the minister's position was based upon, as you inferred, that our objection was incorrect and had no basis. That if we were to object, it would have to be on the basis of individual school sites.
But we did not know that at the time, and I think that's what we've all tried to point out tonight, is that we didn't know what the sites were. We were objecting to the overall school site acquisition charge. So even all of the stuff that you've said, I still don't think the decision that the Minister of Education came to was based on what we were objecting to. It was based on a specific site, which is not what we were objecting to because we don't know where the sites are. So how do you get that across without spending $30,000?
Well, further discussion on this? So we have a motion on the floor here. All those in favor of
The ombudsperson.
ombudsperson? Against? Councillor Martin and Councillor James are against. So it passes.
New motion.
It passed to going to the ombudsman,
Yeah, new motion.
and that being
Prior to pursuit of the preceding motion, I move that we seek resolution first through section, what is it, 284. Probably that's all the motion needs.
Do I have a seconder?
Okay, well, I'm just calling you bluff at this point. So let's go.
Seconder on? No seconder? Fails. Councillor Martin?
Would there be any good, Mr. Chung, trying to communicate and understand the Minister of Education of what we were really, how we feel about his ruling, that we don't really feel that it was what we were objecting to? I mean, that paragraph that we did not meet the criteria, that just absolutely blows me away.
Can it,
Your Worship, through to Councillor Martin, we can certainly express that in a letter to the minister.
I would so move that we write a letter to the Minister of Education,
Seconded.
whatever. You know what has to be said. It really...
Councillor Wallace?
I don't know if we can go back to the account of, I don't even try and pronounce the all, whatever. I had my hand up. I had my hand up to oppose, and I don't think that Mayor Schaefer saw that, so I don't know what we do about that, but my hand was up. So furthermore, I just don't know why. Can I give a reason why? Or
I'll just ask the...
Revisit the vote.
Revisit that vote then.
Yeah, I think that's what we need. I actually did
Okay.
believe that there was a miscount in the vote there.
Okay, all those in favor, if I may then, re-vote for the ombudsman? Against? It's a 3-3, so it fails. Thank you. No, there was no mover and a seconder on that one. Or was it? Oh, okay. Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Okay. Love school stuff.
Clarify after all that. I just want, because that was really muddled, right? So to clarify, we're not going to the ombudsperson. We are not seeking a legal opinion. The only thing we're doing to stand up is sending a letter to the minister that's where we're at. Yeah, disappointing. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is number B, Federal Grant Funding Agreement, TC Grade Crossing Improvement Program, that the City Council authorize staff to execute a railway crossing improvement program agreement between Canada and the City of Langley for federal funding of $14,500 towards the traffic signal upgrade project at railway crossing of mile 21.28 at the Fraser Highway. I need a mover. Councillor Martin, seconder. Councillor James, discussion. Councillor Hall.
Yeah, I'm okay with this upgrade, but how many other future upgrades are we prospectively looking at?
Councillor Chung.
Your worship, to Councillor Hall, this is the only one that we're aware of. How this transpired was that there were a number of incidents at this crossing, and consequently, the Ministry of Transportation, the Federal Ministry of Transportation, imposed a slow-moving train impositions on this crossing from 35 miles per hour to 10 miles per hour unless the city undertake the preemption work. That's what we have done. At that time, the Federal Ministry was considering changing the funding formula for this type of upgrades. In the past, it was they were funding up to 2/3 of the cost. And they were, as I said, they were thinking about changing that funding formula, which we now know is only 50%. So the work has been done, and obviously the rail crossing is back to the 35 miles per hour speed limit, and it's just like I said in the report, it's a housekeeping item, and this is the only one that we're aware of at this point that needs further upgrades.
Supplementary to that, so what contribution does the rail company put in?
Zero. It's just federal ministry and the city of Langley is the road authority that funds this.
I guess this is something maybe that might be pursued through the CP Rail Committee and our liaison with the company. One would expect that the company that's benefiting most from the transport of goods isn't contributing anything to the crossing. Now, I realize it's a public safety issue, but it's also an issue for them. If the safety upgrade results in a collision or a derailment, certainly it costs them, and it costs them in terms of diverting traffic and everything else. So we keep building overpasses, we keep building crossing upgrades, and the company that benefits the most isn't contributing anything. There seems to be something really wrong with that.
We can ask the committee to have that discussion at that next meeting with. Great. So we vote on this particular motion. All those in favor? Against? It's unanimous. The next item we have is the motions. No other motions. Notice the motion. We have a correspondence. We're going to send this to the Township of Langley and city staff. The attached letter is there for the Brookswood Fern Ridge Community Plan, and city staff has sent this letter to the Township of Langley regarding the proposed Brookswood plan. So this is for information. And any questions? Anything else?
I would like staff to speak to this, please. They have three concerns, and I would like them to speak to those three concerns. Certainly, there's been lots of profile for this in the township. It has dramatic effect on the city, particularly on the 196 corridor.
And Mr. Minchuk, this is from your department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Be happy to reiterate the correspondence sent to the Township of Langley in the letter dated March 4th, 2014. Staff reviewed the proposed Brookswood Fern Ridge Community Plan in the context of the city's own plans and policies and offered the following comments. Number one, transportation. 196th Street is designated as a major collector to be constructed north of 44th Avenue through the City of Surrey and the City of Langley. This designation is not consistent with the city's existing Master Transportation Plan, nor the draft Master Transportation update, and will have a significant impact on city residents in the 196 corridor and along east-west feeder routes. Secondly, with respect to stormwater management, urbanization of rural areas and densification of existing urban areas within Anderson Creek, Pleasantdale Creek, and Murray Creek watersheds have a potential to increase flooding and harm fish habitat in the Nickelmackle River. The City of Langley supports the policies outlined in the draft stormwater management plan, portion of the plan, and recommends they be applied to all new developments within the plan area. Thirdly, relating to commercial development, the Brookswood Fern Ridge Plan envisions a significant increase in commercial floor space in the existing community center of 40th Avenue, 200th Street, and the proposed new neighborhood centers. The total floor space potential of 778,000 square feet is within reason for local serving, shopping, and services for a built-up population of 42,000 people. However, if the commercial development advances at a step with the population increases, the resultant oversupply of floor space could harm the City of Langley businesses. It is therefore important from the city's perspective that significant new commercial developments are carefully phased and synchronized with new residential developments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. New business?
No, I want to pursue this.
Go ahead, Councillor Hall.
All right, certainly the 196 corridor is the important impact on the city. It's my understanding that the corporation, or the, what is it, the City of Surrey or the Corporation of Surrey? It's the City of Surrey now. The City of Surrey also objects to the north-south development of a major arterial or along 196. Is that correct?
While we have not had specific contact with the City of Surrey, it's my understanding that that is correct.
I would suggest through the chair that staff immediately pursue this with the City of Surrey and report back to council.
If Councillor
Hall... Does that take a motion?
If Councillor Hall is requesting some information, yes, it will.
I move...
Seconded.
You got the wording of that? I move that the City of Langley contact the City of Surrey regarding objections to the 196th arterial road.
Seconded by Councillor Martin. Discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Further discussion? Seeing none. Any new business? Other than it was my anniversary yesterday, 41 years, so... Oh, it's today, pardon me. So I'm carried off already. Mine was yesterday. Yours was. Well, I need a mover to close this great meeting. Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor James. All those in favor? Thank you.